So the topic today is going to be talking about leading people and the psychology of managing different personalities in the workplace. I think, so many of us, wherever we are within our positions, whether it's management, whether it's business ownership, whether it's actually just being someone on the team, we find ourselves having to navigate both ourselves and our personalities, and then also the varying personalities within the team. And sometimes there can be complications that come up within a group dynamic. And I think that what's really great is we can start to look more into the psychology of what it means to lead people as a group, but then also the psychology of understanding different personality types and how those different personality types can either contribute to the greater team or take away from the team. I think we've all experienced working with difficult personality types in the workplace. And so Susan and I hope to also, hi Cassie, hope to also unpackage, what are the strategies for integrating, trying to work with difficult personalities, better integrating them into the team, and then also, how to better understand them and know the proper communication strategies with them as well. So being told by an employee to work on being a stronger leader because you aren't fully investing all your energy on the mat as you are in the management aspect, and it shows. How to balance being an instructor and a manager. Ooh, girl, we definitely should talk because there is a balance. There definitely is a balance. And when in your role as a manager, your main focus is the business, right? And so definitely facilitating or delegating responsibilities to the team and empowering your instructors. You definitely want to be making sure that you're focusing on, definitely focusing more on your management skills or your management position, as opposed to immersing yourself. Because what happens is, and I was an instructor and then I was promoted into a management position, you're so used to wearing the hat of the instructor. So your tendency is to want to, do all of the physical work, right? Be the lead instructor, do what you were doing before. But then what happens is that it ends up wearing you out, and you overburden yourself with the role of instructing, and then you don't have the energy that you need in order to effectively manage. So it is a matter of understanding what your priority and your focus is as a manager, which is primarily developing the team and helping them improve as instructors, so that way you can start focusing more on the back end or operational side of things. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't also be focused on instructing. I know for me, that was one of my passions. I didn't want to stop instructing, but I recognized that it would require me to instruct less. And ultimately, that was to my benefit when I was able to shift my priority away from being so much on the mat and was able to focus more on the business. We've got Susan on. Oh my gosh, it worked. Oh, guys, there she is. Oh, this is so exciting.
The technology challenged or phone challenge. Maybe it's just my phone. Hello.
No, hi. Oh, I'm so glad you're here. Okay. All right, guys. So we did do it. So we are going to, thank you so much, by the way, Susan, for your patience. I know that this has been equally a struggle for you. But now that we're here, guys, what we're going to do is, we're actually going to take about 20 minutes, 25 minutes to still do our live and kind of hit some general topics related to the subject. And then what we'll do is we'll do like a take two and bring Susan back on, because I know she's got a wealth of knowledge and experience, and we'll be able to ultimately help all of us as we try to become better leaders, and then also better understanding how to work with our teams. So that being said, Susan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Dr. Susan Thompson, and I think I received my PhD from Tulane in 1986 in social psychology, which is basically a research degree. So I know a lot about statistics and statistical models and multivariate analysis. And most of this I just turned into becoming a counselor after my research and writing my dissertation, etc. I did learn a lot in all areas of psychology in my degree, because I had a master's as well.
Wow.
Yeah, and currently I'm an addictions counselor and see clients in La Jolla, California. So
Wonderful. And so to give you guys a little bit of background, Susan is my friend, but she's actually helped me as well. Just sort of when I was struggling with management, early on in my management career, one, learning what it meant for me to be a better leader, because I definitely struggled myself with, understanding the difference between self-leadership and team leadership and team development. So there was a lot of room for growth and exploration for myself in this. And I think a lot of other managers and business owners find themselves in that same space where, they're very effective in self-leading, but then how to translate that into team leadership. And then she also helped, she collaborated with me on coming up with, team development strategies and how to better facilitate communication on the team, how to better integrate team members, and then again, ultimately how to better lead them as a whole and as a unit to kind of unify and a unified front for the business. So super thankful for all the help that you've offered me, and I know that the insights will be just as helpful for those watching.
good.
So yeah, so just to kind of get started, I would love to discuss the difference. I think you had mentioned before, really understanding the negative and positive traits of a boss versus a leader.
Yeah. Well, just think about the word boss. Does anybody like having someone boss them around?
Right,
If you
right.
just take it in that context. No, but everyone likes to be inspired, to be led, to see a vision, to see the future, to see something bigger than themselves.
Right.
And that's really the difference between a leader and a boss. A boss feels like suppression, control, you have to do something, I'm making you do something you don't want to do. And not, of course, I'm giving a boss a bad name, but it's sort of just in a general context. It really is something that you don't even want to think of yourself as a
Right.
boss. You want to think of yourself as a leader,
Right.
somebody who's inspiring, someone who is open-minded, someone who will make the decisions, and when they don't go well, they take responsibility for
Right.
it. Okay, there's a lot of characteristics. Like I said, you have to have the bigger picture. You want to see the long term. You have to be able to roll with change.
Mm-hmm.
And all of the horrible boss characteristics are almost the opposite of that.
Right. Right. There tends to be a little bit of rigidity. And so here's the sort of, I think, Jared and I in the past have talked a lot about the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. We've highlighted Carol Dweck's work in her book called Mindset. And so not to be redundant here. But, I think what happens is, I think, again, leaders or managers tend to oscillate between, just as much as they oscillate between a growth mindset or a fixed mindset, sometimes they all, I think, we want to assume that people want to be good leaders, that I don't think anybody ever goes into a position hoping to be a bad leader, but what happens is we don't always know the difference between being a boss and being a leader. And I think even for myself, when I was, again, early into my management career, that I was being just a boss, that my understanding of leadership was bossy, and I had, again, I went to you and really had to unpack, the difference between the two and look at myself and understand how I could better communicate, and we've had an entire episode based on communication, but better communicate, to be inspiring, to be inclusive, to be, again, really getting the team engaged in their work that's really meaningful for them, right?
Right.
So I guess, talking about this, what happens, I think, sometimes is that the stress and responsibility of the job itself tends to impact our leadership, right? And so that happens both from the top of the leadership, right? So from the management side of things, but then it also impacts the team. So how would you say that managers typically respond? What's the typical response within leadership when they are functioning from that place of stress?
Well, I think you go to the controlling, trying to get it done position, because usually if you're a manager, then that by default means that there's somebody above you
Right.
that's expecting you to do something.
Right.
And if you have a deadline, then you're kind of, people under stress, or when they're sick or in difficult situations, have a tendency to regress. We go to the worst traits within ourselves. rather than the best.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to sort of stand aside from ourselves and say, oh, okay, this is my tendency. I know I'm under stress. I know there's deadlines. I know there's things I have to do. But I need to continue with my leadership model.
Right.
Okay. And so if I'm under stress, then the team is under stress. And the best way to, and if you can see someone, maybe one of the people has to get the job done is angry, somebody's acting passive aggressive, somebody's checked out, and then there's always the good ones when, when the going gets tough, the tough gets going,
Right.
get going.
Right.
So you always have those. But I think that really in a group situation, if you are trying to get a team to do something, it's all about communicating.
Mm-hmm.
You got to tell them, look, I feel terrible about this. This is really hard. We have to get this done by Friday. I feel stressed. My boss is trying to get me to do it. I need you all to do it. And we need to come together.
Right.
So now you're stepping into leadership. You're explaining the situation. You're not saying, you better get this done or I'm going to fire you.
Right.
That's the
right. Right.
So you move into that. As soon as you start communicating, you're in leadership. If you're not communicating and you're demanding and you're controlling, you're stepping out of leadership. So once you start speaking and expressing where you are and essentially telling how you feel.
Yeah.
And then asking for feedback from them.
Right.
And then coming to a conclusion, all of you together, now you're in leadership.
Right. And so
in a situation, go ahead.
Oh, no, please continue.
So no matter the whatever kind of performance the boss or manager has to do, and they need people under them essentially to do it, it's all about being a person, saying that you're stressed, explaining why, explaining what the job is and when it needs to be done. So very clear on the goal.
I love that.
And then moving towards hearing from, well, I don't want to do this, hearing the feedback. You say, yeah, well, I don't either. Communicating, being a person, helping them. If you need help, I'll help you.
Yeah.
So it really is, but if you step back, if you remove yourself from the team and try to shove it on them,
right,
or try to suppress them or control them or blame them, now that's the horrible boss.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there is a tendency, I think it's just a human tendency to want to place blame somewhere else outside of ourselves and to assume that it's the team's fault for things not getting done. And I think that, what you said as far as I hope you guys are taking notes because this is pure gold, what she's saying right here. So one, as soon as you start communicating, you're in leadership. So I think one of the things that you definitely have helped me understand, Susan, is that there's nothing wrong with bringing that sense of cultivating that sense of vulnerability, openness, and honesty with the people that you're working with. So I think there were times when I was struggling as a manager, again, to meet goals, to meet deadlines, to meet these expectations that were being placed upon me from the ownership standpoint.
Right.
And recognizing that when you're working from that place of stress, again, typically communication is maybe the first thing that's going to go, right? You shift into that boss mode where you are holding expectations, those expectations that are being held of you, you are then holding on above for the team as well. But then we just stop expressing the significance of the work itself that we're doing, but then also our own feelings about it. And so I found, and through, again, your encouragement, and just completely owning the fact that I was struggling with this experience as well,
exactly.
And then honoring the fact that they're probably not liking it either, but hey, look, guys, let's not be miserable as a group, right? Let's honor the fact and accept the fact that we're not, this is really hard for all of us, but let's try to rally together and get out of this situation as a team so that way we can move past this.
Right. And then in the end, let's say you have a Friday deadline for a project. It doesn't get done for whatever reason. It was asking too much too soon,
right.
Whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Then as a manager, as a leader, you have to take 100% of the responsibility. It has to be, the old saying, the buck stops here.
Yes.
So you don't want to then, if you do all this leadership and you're inspiring and everybody's working together and it still doesn't get done, you still have to take all the responsibility. and not blame the team. You just have to explain to the team it didn't get done. We have to do more work on Monday, or whatever you need to do. But that the responsibility always lies at the top. Even if there's somebody clearly to blame, can't go there.
So that's interesting. So I think that that's, what we would, in that statement, there's a lot of people in leadership positions who are, again, giving their ultimate best and who are really great at communicating and are trying their best to motivate and rally the team. And yet they're finding it they're still finding personalities within the team that are just not, that are just not really responding. So what would you say are the top 3 contributing factors to, like that, or I would say, what are the top 3 things that complicate team dynamics in that way?
Well, I mean, if you have a person that's been hired that truly has a personality disorder or has something that is unchangeable in essence, or a person who can't work in groups, you're going to have some trouble.
Right.
And I think everyone understands the narcissistic personality disorder. That the reason why that one always comes up is because it's the one that is people who are narcissistic get into the workplace and often become managers because they are very they're very controlling, and sometimes that kind of behavior, that kind of trait can get you a job or up to the top. Some of the other personality disorders like paranoia or schizoid type, these are people who are withdrawn or they want to be away from people.
Right.
So you don't hear those, you just hear about narcissism because that's the number one.
Right. And I would say that's probably the one that I've seen the most as well.
Right. And narcissism is to be a narcissistic personality disorder, you have to be pretty extreme, but then there's also just narcissism.
Right.
It's a little different.
Right.
And those are people who are only about themselves, and you can't really change it. You just have to either fire that person, essentially, or you have to work around them. You're going to have to get the other team members to come together to kind of understand what's going on, accept what's going on, and still do the work.
Yeah.
So, you're going to have people who are going to be difficult, and the rest of the people, unfortunately, have to take up the slack, and so does the boss, the leader.
Right. And so I think you had mentioned a while back that there's sort of, and I think that this is important because managers oftentimes take things personally, right? And I think, again, it's human nature to take things personally and to assume that if someone is acting out in the workplace, or if there is the sense of, if there are things complicating the team dynamic, that it's because of us, right? And so I think there is a limit to the responsibility that we take. I think absolutely we should be taking the majority of the responsibility, but again, we don't take everything personally when things do go wrong, right? So I just wonder.
That's very different.
Right.
Those are 2 different things.
Right. And so my question is, like, how would you help managers better understand or better anticipate what to expect as far as the different types of people that they'll see on their team? I think you had mentioned before, like, some people are going to love you, some people are not, right? And so what can you say about that? And then also, what can you say about how to better build relationships with people that maybe are not performing well on the team or are not communicating well?
Well, those difficult people are, you have to use a lot of praise, a lot of, seeing, it's like a child in a way. When you catch them being good, you gotta you have to almost be a parent. And unless there's other ways to deal with that person, move them into another place. But if you can't do that and you're stuck with them, then you catch them being good. You look at every time they do something right, you overly praise.
Okay.
And you begin to draw them towards you. Okay. And they start feeling good about it. And then they know praise is coming. And this is you think, why do I have to praise somebody who's supposed to do a job who's getting paid for it? This is the reaction you're going to have. But the truth is that when you're the leader, you're everything. You're mom, dad, aunt, uncle. You're all the things that people need.
Right.
And people need praise, and people need caring, and people need attention. And so if you are not getting what you need from that person, these are the techniques that you can use. You can give them you can give them more attention. You can give them a job you know that they can do, and then you praise the heck out of
Right.
it. So you draw them in by selectively seeing when they're doing well. If they have some bad behavior, just like you would a kid, you ignore it.
That's
And then you
so
constantly,
interesting. That's so interesting
yes,
because I think the tendency is, at least in what I, again, like in the people that have trained me in the past, it's like you want to address the bad behavior, right? I mean, of course, you want to lead with a compliment, and then lead with acknowledging the good work that has been done, but then at the same time make sure that you're addressing the issue of the work that isn't being done. So would you
right.
say that in this specific case with people that are hypersensitive or really difficult to coach, that you just really focus on the positive with them?
Yeah, I would use that technique until you've burnt it out, essentially.
Okay.
You know, so you're forced into a position of addressing,
Yeah.
and then the work that's not being done. And even then, when you address it, you do it in a very positive way.
Right.
And you use lots of positive praise, and then you say, and I'm wondering if there's something else that we can do about the fact that you haven't been meeting your goals. Is there
Mm-hmm.
something we can do about this? You join in to help them with whatever problem they're having,
Right.
or whatever work they're not doing. What can we do instead of, remember, no blaming?
Right.
How can we access some success here for you in this area?
Yeah.
It's just very positive language, and no blaming, no anger. You can't be arrogant. You can't be overly emotional. You just always trying to massage that person into the place you want them to be.
Right. And I know that, Jared was actually we were speaking about this earlier, about one of the two things that he trains his managers to be is, one, predictable. And then also like really even keeled, right? So never like allowing the highs to be too high or the lows to be too low. And then of course,
Absolutely.
predictable so that
Very.
yeah, so predictable so that people can anticipate how you're going to respond. And when he said that, I just thought that
Right.
was great, because then that way people don't feel like they're walking on eggshells and like not knowing if you're going to fly off the handle, or if, again, if you're just, one day you're hot, one day you're cold. But he does bring up this really great point right here. And he says, if you're overly praising, what impact does that have on the rest of the team? And does that mean, or does that push you to do even more for the rest of the team? And then also, how do you protect yourself from being accused as playing favorite? So if there's one person, it could be seen by the rest of the team as being overly protective of somebody who isn't really holding up their end.
Right. They have a saying. They've done, my degree in social psychology, they've done studies, and they say, can you overly praise someone? No. The answer was, will it become ingratiating? They said that you have to praise way off the charts, like out in outer space, for people to even know that you're doing it, because people are starved for it.
Right.
I think that if anybody came to you, if you were a boss and you said, you always give all that other person praise, you never tell me anything. And I would say, well, hey, I accept that. And I will, I'm going to start looking at what you do well and tell you about it. I mean, look, leaders praise constantly.
Right. Right.
All right. That's just part of it. You are there, you're there to, like I said, be mom, dad, all these people to them. And that's just part of the job.
Right.
And to accept that and to say, it's like if you have 4 kids, and I always put everything back to families, the other 3 know that the 4th one who's getting extra praise is getting it because they got problems.
Ah.
They know what's going on.
Right.
All right.
Right.
The point is to keep the positive nature of your team together.
Right.
And to not be beaten up on one. And so you're praising everyone all the time. You're just giving this other person, you're being very calculated in how you do it. You're
right.
watching for them to do well.
Right. And I think that,
and you're trying to shape their behavior. You're doing behavior modification. You're shaping their behavior watching for the good, praising it, ignoring the bad.
Right. And I think I think another component, and maybe this is something Jared can add to his model, is that, or maybe he already has it. It's a bad assumption on my part, is that, managers or leaders are purposeful, right? They're very purposeful. I think they're intentional. And so kind of removing yourself a little bit from really the emotional component of what's going on, right? And I think that it's so easy, because we're human beings, we're emotional people, to again take things personally or to get upset about things, and then let that impact the way I'm certainly no exception to this, where it's impacted the way that I've communicated with the people on my team. And I think managers find themselves in that place a lot. So what tips or strategies can you give managers who are being triggered emotionally by their teams, or the lack of performance, or the stress themselves, and so that they can communicate in a way that's authentic with the people they're trying to manage and lead, but then also helps them manage their own emotions?
Well, if you're leading, you're definitely have to create a filter for criticism, because if you're a leader, you're putting yourself
You're front
out
and
there.
center. Yeah.
You're front and center for all the criticism. If you're a follower, you can hide.
Right.
You're not going to receive it. If you're a leader, by definition and by default, and I'll go into the thing I told you, we talked about it, just you alluded to, is that 25% of the people, if you're a leader, they're never coming around to liking you. Okay, this is about liking. That doesn't mean they won't do the work.
Right.
Liking you. 25% of the people, no matter what you do, are going to love you. That's the happy part. And then the 50% are the ones that could be swayed either way, that you want to, again, modify their behavior to come on board with you, to get to 75%. And that doesn't mean you can't get 100% of your team to do the work, but you're not always going to get everybody to like you. And so you just have to, there's certain things that, as a leader, that are baseline things you have to accept.
Right.
Tons of criticism, people aren't going to like you, and that's just the nature of the job.
Right.
But when you have your own, if you're triggered, you sort of have to analyze yourself. You have to take a look at it and say, what's this about? Do I have some issues related to this? Maybe I need to talk to somebody about this who knows something about this.
Right.
Leadership is growth. You are going to be confronted about everything that you have never dealt with in your life if you're a leader.
Yeah.
It's going to push you, but that's the beauty of it.
Right.
Is it's going to take you to new heights, become a better person.
Right.
To be, like I said, to affect change in other people and to lead is a fabulous thing. But you have to be willing to look inside and to shift out of maybe your own negative traits.
Right. And so maybe cultivating a really strong sense, excuse me, a really strong sense of self-awareness. I think that,
Yes.
Oftentimes, again, in speaking with you about, I've talked to you for hours about things that I was experiencing on my team. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it came back to me and my filter and how I was processing the information and the experiences and what I needed to change about myself ultimately, to again become a better leader, so that I could again better engage, motivate, and develop the team. So I think if anything, I know it's 1:00, so we can end here and then hopefully pick this up on a second conversation to go deeper, because I have so many other questions that I would love to ask you. But okay. I think the best takeaway here is that if you find yourself in a leadership position and you're working with a team, that there's going to be issues naturally that come up when you're working with various personality types, and that your position is to develop those people as best as possible. But you cannot fully develop them to their best if you are not also looking at yourself and recognizing the places within yourself that you also need to develop. So the conflict, and I think, Susan, you have taught me this as well, is that the conflict that exists within the team is probably also a reflection of the conflict that you are also experiencing within yourself.
Yes. So it's, the ultimate learning experience. Just briefly, I ran a business in New Orleans when I lived there before, and I had someone come in and analyze my leadership. And they gave me, oh, this was good, this was good. They said, but in a crisis, you're not there.
Oh.
When things got really, when there were, or not even a crisis, but if there were changes, She says, it just seemed that that time these situations, you were not fully present. And I had to take a look at that and go, you're right. And so I learned just a tremendous amount from having someone come in and say, this, and this is what you're not doing.
Right.
So if you really want to know,
right.
get an outside, come in and evaluate you. They'll tell you everything. And that's the fast track.
Right.
For leadership. If you can afford something like that, or your business could afford it, then they can come in, and if you have, you got to have the guts for it, and they'll tell you, because the people will tell them.
Right. Exactly. So. The team is more readily able to communicate their concerns to an outsider than they are directly Absolutely. To you.
They're willing and ready to do that.
Yeah. So Britannia says, management definitely is the loneliest job because there will never be a time where everyone likes you. So hard to swallow for sensitive people like myself, but I am growing for sure. And ultimately, yes. And that's why, leaders are first courageous and willing to take on the responsibility of others as well as they're taking on the responsibility of themselves. And so we're in a very unique position, but it's an amazing position because we have the most to gain out of that experience, right? As far as our own personal growth and development. So maybe the best way to look at it is the best way to look at it for yourself is to say, what is this experience going to teach me about myself that will ultimately help me better serve those that I am trying to lead?
Absolutely. And will serve you in your own life.
Right, exactly. Personally. Because the professional stuff translates, right?
It spreads everywhere. It's not just in the workplace.
Right, absolutely. Well, Susan, we're so thankful that you popped on today. So sorry again
I'm so sorry.
No. You know what? If Jared wasn't here, so it was perfect because we have something like this, a technological difficulty every time. Just kidding, Jared. We missed you today. But yeah, so we'll definitely be bringing Susan back on. If you loved this or found value in it, please share it. Give us a love, give us a like, and we look forward to continuing this conversation in a couple weeks.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much. Bye, guys.